we have a lot of places in the world where virginity has to be proven, and it has to be proven by blood. A girl being taken to maybe a community leader, or maybe even by her own family member, her father, to put 2 fingers in the vagina to see if the vagina is tight enough. And if it's not, then she's not virgin. And that can put her in a lot of trouble. And that's why a lot of women are forced to undergo hymenoplasty, because of fear of what will happen to me. There can be an honor killing, there can be violence, she can be ostracized, she can be given back. Happens also that because what it turns down to is controlling women, about not letting the woman be an owner of her own body and sexuality. The sexuality of a woman belongs to the family, the husband's family, and it's a part of the deal when you get married, you know. I'm Mirja. I am a Swedish journalist and a women's rights activist. I'm 34 years old, and I've come to Kenya to cover women's rights, learn about women's situation here. Yeah, there are a lot of challenges when it comes to women's rights, like globally. But I come from a background where I've been writing about virginity testing and virginity surgery, something that we can talk about more in depth later, but that is also has been kind of my, way into FGM. Women are second-class citizens. We are struggling every day with violence against women. In my country, Sweden, a man kills his own wife or girlfriend or ex-girlfriend every 3rd week. There is so much violence against women, so much gender-based violence. There is so much rape, and most of the rapes, 95% of the reported rapes, which is just a little fraction of all the rapes that happens, 95% leads nowhere. So 5% lead to trial. So there is impunity for rapists in Sweden. There are many people who have a negative approach to feminism, a misunderstanding, lack of knowledge. There is a lot of racism, there is a lot of sexism and homophobia, we have a lot of problems, and still, that's the best place to be, And you come down here, this is people ask me, like, how has it been because I've traveled to maybe 40 countries, but this is my first time to Africa. It has been overwhelming, and I'm still like kind of trying to process everything, and it will take time. And it's just like everyone who's working with human rights can kind of understand, like that feeling of that the work is important, but at the same time, like, should I go into the shoe business or some other business? Because it's just sometimes way too depressing. And you just I think I was an idealist when I started, started traveling the world when I was maybe a teenager or 20, and I really thought I could change things. I kind of lost hope lately, and I've been engaged, and this is so far away, but I've been engaged in my I come from a town called Piteå in north of Sweden, and we haven't had a women's shelter. So abused women haven't had anywhere to go. So me and my friends have started the new women's shelter in my hometown, and we are working with that, and we are getting training through that. And when you really learn, understand how much violence there is against women, like in our communities, in our country, it's just depressing. But also growing up as a girl in Sweden, growing up as a jazz musician. That's my first career. I'm a jazz musician, I'm a singer. And growing up and seeing how different, it is, how much harder it is to be a girl, being exposed to sexual violence as a kid, it's so many things, like not being listened to from an early age, knowing that you are not in the same level, as boys. That was that I learned that very quickly, and I didn't like that because I'm all for justice and equality and like those values that I had. So I think I wanted to, there has been, I'm very kind of a whistleblower person. I'm always like not creating troubles, but calling out on bullshit, you know, calling out on people who use their position. Like I've been the same since I was a kid. And yeah, so I first learned about virginity testing and virginity surgery, also called hymenoplasty or hymen repair surgery, when I was living in Kosovo. I moved to Kosovo in 2019, and it took me a few months to actually come across this topic. I heard people talk about, you know, stitching before the marriage, before the day, and I was like, maybe it is what some women do in the West, some kind of plastic surgery to make the vagina more tight. Didn't think so much about it more, but then I started reading news articles and reports and started talking about this topic to people. And I realized, wow, this is something going on. Virginity surgery is being done to women. Virginity testing and virginity surgery, this is a concept of controlling women's sexuality, which is done according to the UN in at least 20 countries. It's more than that. There are millions. Think about how many women live in the areas of the Middle East, the Northern Africa, Southeast Asia, and the Balkans, and in the West, where we have a lot of immigration also. And it's interesting, as we spoke of how here people know about FGM, but in many other places people are not familiar with FGM. And it's because we know what's close to us, and most people don't have an interest with what's going on far away. It has the same spring or the same place where it comes from as FGM, about controlling women, about not letting the woman be an owner of her own body and sexuality. The sexuality of a woman belongs to the family, the husband's family, and it's a part of the deal when you get married, you know. So how to try to shortly describe the practice of virginity testing and virginity surgery is that for thousands of years it has been important for women to be virgins when they marry. And it still is important in many cultures and in many places for millions and millions of people in this world still today. But this traces back long, you know. But virginity testing is a completely unscientific test that has been traditionally been done with 2 fingers. A girl been taken to a health clinic or to maybe a community leader or maybe even by her own family member, her father, to put 2 fingers in the vagina to see if the vagina is tight enough. And if it's not, then she's not virgin. And that can put her in a lot of trouble. There can be an honor killing, there can be violence, she can be ostracized, she can be given back. Happens also that because what it turns down to is blood on the sheets. And in the olden days, in some parts of the world, even put the sheet up on the balcony to show the neighbors that the girl was a virgin. So it's important to bleed during the wedding night. And as our societies and the world has developed and women have gained more freedom, women have also started to have sex before their marriages. And then virginity surgery, it's you stitch in the hymen a few stitches in order to create bleeding during the first intercourse. So women go to health clinics, and it's a very quick, take just a few minutes. It's not long lasting. We don't know the long lasting, damages because it's not done enough research. You can say that virginity surgery, hymenoplasty, is a solution for women to prove that to come across as virgins even if they are not. And it's interesting, I read a study by Fatima Mernissi. She's a Moroccan scientist from like 1984. I remember she wrote that the hymenoplasty is just a modern version of what we used to do in the olden days before the 80s, sprinkle some chicken blood on the sheet. to prove. So we have a lot of places in the world where virginity has to be proven, and it has to be proven by blood, and that's why a lot of women are forced to undergo hymenoplasty because of fear of what will happen to me. I remember interviewing a Swedish woman. She was having a friend who was they took her out of the country. They sent her back to her home country because she was, promiscuous in their view, and she was used as a way of horrifying other girls in the community. That if you be like her, we will just send you away, you will never come back. These are children we're talking about. And she was getting married to a man that the family had chosen for her. And they're often it is like that the family of the husband ask for a proof of virginity in the form of a certificate, a paper. So, as I also said in my hometown, we had the hospital doing these kind of certificates. It's illegal now in France, but we have these certificates as proofs, and when you trade goods, it's a proof of quality, and often it's asked by the family of the husband so that they know that she is a real virgin, because that's so important, So you can see how it's quite related. Virginity testing, making sure, controlling that she's still a virgin, virginity surgery, and how we can see something that is a different practice. Both are still harmful practices. We are stitching, we are cutting in women's genital parts in our bodies, and for what reason? Like, how can this be still going on? Millions of women suffering today, 2022. In my work with covering the European mainly debate and work with different governments and legislation when it comes to banning virginity testing and banning virginity surgeries, I have interviewed doctors, politicians, parliamentarians, anthropologists, gynecologists, survivors, and been to conferences, etc., etc. And one of the persons who inspired me is an activist, and she's also the advisor of the government in the UK, and her name is Nimco Ali. And she is a really, really strong and inspirational, human rights activist with a very big focus on FGM. But so it was speaking about virginity testing and virginity surgeries. We also spoke about FGM, and the importance of keeping that. We have laws against FGM, but it took, I don't know how many years, but it took very long time to have the first cases of FGM in the UK and in Sweden also. So in these conversations, I started to I got an interest in learning more about FGM, and I was interviewing a researcher who explained that a girl was diagnosed with ADHD by the teacher did that and said that there is something wrong with this girl, and it was because she had to go to the toilet all the time because her pee couldn't come out of the hole. And that's the reality for millions of girls. So my experience coming here to Kenya as a journalist from Sweden, trying to learn in a quite short amount of time about FGM, I would like to start in Kisii. I was in Kisii for 2 days, and it was one of the greatest learning experiences of my life. I was taken care of by a very, very professional, good organization called CCOM. I also met with another organization called Manga Heart. And these people made a huge impression on me. And so did the people that I interviewed. And I want to take 2 examples of 2 survivors of FGM that I interviewed. They were both teenagers, around 14 years old. And the first girl, it was my first interview with the survivor, she did this interview. Just went very well. I was very nervous. I was, wanting to make sure to be respectful talking with someone so young about something so sensitive. So we did the interview. I learned her story, and she was blindfolded like many other of the girls. Many of the girls have been recently cut also. But anyways, in the end of the story, or in the end of the interview, I wanted to wrap up and kind of have a small talk and thank her and just like ask her if she had any questions to me. And and I thought maybe she will ask, where do you come from? Are you married? Something like that. And she asked me, and I remember her using this specific term, can you explain in depth the long-term consequences of FGM to me? I didn't know what to say, and luckily I had Cici right next to me, and she was ready to, in Kiswahili, explain and tell her answer her question. And then I gave her I said, if you want, you can ask me something that I might be able to answer. Because I said to her, I'm just a journalist here trying to learn about this. This is what I want to ask you about. I don't have these answers, I'm trying to find out. And so I said, do you have a second question for me? And she said, yes, can you explain to me the emotional consequences of FGM? And I was once again really struck by these questions. It was so unexpected to me that she would ask me. It was so clear that she didn't know. Otherwise, she wouldn't ask me. She had no idea. She knew that it was illegal. She knew it was bad. But how will it affect my life? How am I going to live with this? What will it do to me? How can I fight this in depth? Key word, learning and understanding something, not just having an organization coming by your school talking for 1 hour saying to the kids that this is illegal, we're not doing this anymore. So that was my first interview. A few hours later, we went to school, and I sat down with another girl, another survivor, and she told me that she was pro-FGM. And she told me that her grandmother did it, and she went along with it because her grandmother told her that she will become promiscuous if she's not going to be cut. And that was what she still believed until this day, until a few days ago when I sat down and spoke with her. And I asked her, do you really, what is promiscuous? Like, what does that word even mean? It means that you play with boys, and boys might rape you. And I was like, since your grandmother taught you this about FGM, have you had any other kind of information, any other kind of education or training information that is in the contrary of this? And she said no. So yes, I said, no, there has been no one coming to your school to work with you and to teach you about this? No. So these were just the two survivors. I interviewed other girls, other survivors as well. So I talked to them, and it felt like they didn't really understand why I was there, Like we had this experience, they told me. I interviewed 6 of them, I talked to them. They all wanted to be pilots and doctors. It was very nice to meet them, and I tried to have a good chat with them and be respectful, but I also felt like these girls, they were still, one of them was 15 years old, and I tried to ask them, do you know anything about sex, and have you spoken about these sort of things? And it was clear to me that they were not aware, they were luckily unaware of the in-depth, like in the long-term consequences of FGM. It's so normalized. These girls, it's just like so normalized, so it's not even, why are we even talking about it, So that was the girls. Then I also interviewed 3 doctors. I was in Kisii and in Nyamira, And I interviewed doctors, 3 doctors. None of them told me that they had received any particular training on FGM in particular. They had some other form of information and training on gender-based violence, but nothing particularly on FGM. All of the 3 doctors they expressed the feeling of neglect, that they felt neglected and unequipped to fight the problem. Then I interviewed a chief who also said that I don't know like what to do. I haven't seen anything, because I specifically asked like the president has said that the goal is to eradicate FGM by 2022. I mean, it's a good idea, it's a good goal, but there is a clear difference between wishful thinking and show me the money. You know, in the end of the day, that is what I as a journalist, you know, need to find out. That's my job to, because there is no doubt there are all these great activists, especially women, working every day to fight FGM. But the question is, are they given the FGM board, let's say, are they given the resources that they need? It's good to have goals. I'm not against goals, but it has been interesting being in Kisii, for example, and you know, like people are want to say good things about the government, and are very in Narok as well. Like, yeah, the government are doing a lot of great work, you know, and I'm just like asking specifically. I was at a school in Narok, and I was with the principal, and I was with a lot of staff members, and I asked specifically about like, give me an example, show me the money, like what resources have you been given to fight FGM? And they just laughed, you know. And this is like this is how I, in a very, very short time, you know, experiencing it, is that the people in Kisii feel, when it comes to FGM, a bit overlooked. And there has been maybe more focus on Narok, on Masai, you know, maybe Korea, maybe other places have gotten more attention and more work, since we connect FGM to underdevelopment, and you know, like that. And Kisii is a very like progressive. If we look at the statistics of how many people are against FGM, it's one of the highest in Kisii. So that is also interesting from the point that has developed into medicalized FGM. We have people in Kisii progressive community have realized that this is bad, we need to do something about it. But as people explained this to me, was that how we understood FGM from the beginning, when we started talking more about how it's illegal and how we should end FGM. We spoke a lot about the quick, the short time damages, which is bleeding, overbleeding, infections, and death by overbleeding or like infections. So in a way to get around that, we ended up having now the 2 of 3 FGM is done medicalized by medical personnel or people claiming to be. You know, as they told me, it can even be the guy mopping the floor in the hospital, just because he says he works at the hospital. I was actually watching the news yesterday about a reportage from Kisii about medicalized FGM. So we are starting to talk about it. But I think that many have the conception or the idea that, Kisii, and many actually, there is, as a journalist, like being here for a very short of time, I still have discovered or experienced the disconnect between the people on the ground, the survivors, the teenage girls survivors, and the people working with them, teachers, principals, also parents and chiefs. Like speaking to these people, and then speaking to some other people maybe in Nairobi. I was in the salon yesterday the wax lady, I explained to her, I said I was here to do work about FGM. And she said, I don't know almost nothing. I know, what is FGM? And I explained that there are different types. She was so shocked. She had no idea. No idea. I went to Karen to some horse race thing, and people were like astonished by just one day of interviews I made by going to Kisi, like just telling them about what's going on. And people are like, can't believe you have all this information. I can't believe you know this is happening. I had no idea this was still going on in this scale. And that is the only thing upsetting that I've experienced in Kenya, is that when I share these girls' stories, and I also shared a little bit about, you know, these other people that I interview and their feeling and like how they feel that they're being helped or not. There was a woman contacting me claiming that she was one of the founders of the FGM board, and just like saying to me that the cycle of silence has been successfully broken. This is not a strange topic in Kenya anymore. The government is doing so much. Every girl knows about FGM. This is not what you're saying is not true. This is what it's like. And I was like, I was shocked, but I was also like very upset, you know, to be basically called a liar. Or is she calling the survivors liars? Or is it the schoolgirls in Kisi that has a hidden agenda? Made no sense to me, you know. And then I asked for an interview with the board, you know, and she sent me the number to the CEO, and I said thank you. And then she continued to say, you have the totally wrong information about FGM in Kenya. And I was like, I didn't want any kind of fight or trouble, but I felt like I need to stand up for myself. And I just wrote very shortly that I believe in the schoolgirls that I've interviewed, but I also look forward to hearing the perspective from the board. Have a good day. And then she replied me, if you're going to go with their stories, there is no need for you to contact the board at all. Instead of telling me this is not what's going on, ask me, show interest in the stories from the ground. Don't try to silence them. Don't try to say it's not true. If we are going to have any chance of winning over this should be the main focus. This is where all our ears should be turned to, the survivors' stories, supporting them, making them champions in their own communities, you know, letting them lead the way. Not someone sitting in an office in Nairobi maybe, or I don't know. The only thing I've experienced, the only thing I can, you know, like try to figure out as an explanation that I've experienced in my earlier work in the Balkans as well, is that sometimes how the work looks becomes more important than the work itself, you know. It's not that uncommon. We need this to look good for our country. We need this to look good for our agency, for our NGO. So when bad stories pops up, it comes into some kind of conflict with the promotion of the work. But this is the work. Listening to the girls is the work. And it shouldn't be any other way. And if you're not doing that, I don't think you should be working with human rights. You could be working in another business. The things that slow me down. You ask me about when I feel like I am helpless. I think I feel helpless like most of the time when it comes to making some actual change in this world. Still trying though. But I think for me personally, this is very personal. I think everyone is very different, you know, in what motivates them. But I get my power from women. I get my inspiration when I load my batteries, you know, when I light up. This is something I do when I come together with other women. This is my life. This is my inspiration. This is my dream, to work to empower women and, you know, give women better lives. And we should never call out each other like that openly and try to make each other look bad or something. We should always seek for ways to cooperate and learn from each other and discuss in a respectful manner when we have different views on certain things. The end game, I think, is to do as much as possible during my life to you know, create change, inspire others to work for change, both men and women. I mean, we need more men. I think in the West we have started to, you know, include men more in the. Men start to feel like feminism is this kind of. We talked earlier about this kind of misunderstanding that feminism or women's rights is to make women more powerful than men. You know, it's about gender equality, and I think with more education, we know this now more and more men are talking about feminism from a male perspective, mental health, you know, being able to be what it means for a father to have the opportunity to spend time with his family, his children, parental leave, you know, how men are, the high suicide rates amongst men. I mean, I lived in Kosovo, and men didn't talk about their weaknesses, their struggles. They didn't speak openly about how they felt about relationships or sex or these kind of more private matter. After a few glasses of raki, they spoke, and they said that we suffer in silence, you know, and that is a big problem, and that is something that feminism has a goal. That is the goal of feminism, is to make us more equal and make women more free, but at the same time make men free. Men are also victims of lack of gender balance in, for example, you know, like mental health, violence amongst men. Letting men be exactly there is a lot of, you know, social norms of how we should be as men or as women, and this is limiting men as well from reaching their full potential and living the life they dream of, you know, following their heart and dreams, expressing who they are. Many feel like they live in a prison because of macho culture and, you know, so many ideals that are norms that are so integrated in society, the expectations of how a man should be like, you know. So the work needs to involve men for men's own sake as well. I think sometimes I've been watching the news lately, and it's a lot of talk about here in Kenya about how men also need to champion, you know, for FGM, and maybe some people think that it almost come across as charity. Men should engage, you know, to help women from this, but it's important also in a bigger perspective, not just with FGM, but when we speak about gender equality or gender inequality overall, to see that to empower men and support men, for men to support women and be feminist and be engaged, it is not only charity that will benefit women, it will highly benefit men. The only, you know, like the work of a journalist is to, you know, be, or activists, like using my social media platform, for example, or writing, you know, it's not mainly about, or it's not at all maybe when it comes to journalism, writing reportage, it's not about my thinking. It's about mirroring the reality as good as possible. And I think that is what I've been trying to do here. And yeah, I've learned a lot from these stories, and I will keep having contact with these grassroots level organizations, their partners. I want to continue to learn about this because my goal is that we will all learn. I think that is the key knowledge, you know, to the way we need to do it. If we speak in more global terms, we need to learn so much more. There are so many people in Sweden, for example, many other countries as well, obviously, that have never heard about, you know, FGM, might have some sort of idea of it. Maybe they watch something once in the news or something, but they have no real knowledge about it. Or virginity testing, or virginity surgeries. How we are stitching, cutting, you know, torturing, like taking body parts out of women to control them still today. I think that this is something we need to learn more about in our societies in the West as well. We need to take care of our new citizens that have fled from war and conflict, like the girls in Sweden that are forced to undergo surgeries or virginity testing or FGM or forced marriage. How can we support them? I know it's not the same thing, and I'm not trying to say that virginity surgery or hymenoplasty is as FGM. It's very important to know the difference between them. But in the end of the day, it's stitching or cutting in a woman to keep her subordinated, to keep her under control, to take away from her sexual freedom, her basic human rights. After a stitching or hymenoplasty, you can still have feelings, but when you remove clitoris, and when you remove, it's like hearing, seeing, feeling, tasting, like to take away that from a person is such a serious crime. And that is also what a lot of the people I interviewed said, that we need really okay, people are convicted, but like we need to follow up these court cases. People need be convicted to long sentences. And also something I learned actually yesterday by listening to interviews with cutters in the Maasai community is how important it is to create alternative ways of income for the cutters, for the women, because it's a financial thing as well. It's what they earn in December. They earn a lot of money, maybe $15, $20 per girl, and it's their livelihood. And it's hard to take for moral reasons, for also trying to influence an old person, which is totally depending on this income. We need to see politicians, local and on the highest level, to speak about FGM and to, inspire others, call it out for what it is, But most people I've met that I asked that question said that they are afraid of losing votes. They're not going to touch upon the topic because they are afraid of losing votes. And most of all, the women who already have such a small piece of the pie, who struggle so much to get into politics with funding and everything. It's like almost, it's even more hard for the women to bring this up. So finally, I think Kenya has done a lot of great work, still is doing a lot of great work. There are countries where FGM is not even banned. There are countries that are way back. There's been a lot of progress. Look at the statistics, it's getting better, but it's still a very long way to go. And I think that, there are many challenges as we have been speaking about, but at the same time, it's important to also not forget that this country has made a lot of progress.